They laughed at me for being a single mom, until the groom revealed what I did for him. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
I never thought my life would turn into the kind of story people whisper about behind closed doors. My name is Alec Rose, and for as long as I can remember, I've carried the weight of judgment on my shoulders, not because I committed some crime, not because I did something unthinkable, but simply because I was a single mom. You see, people don't need to know your whole story before they decide who you are. They take one glance, one rumor, one label, and suddenly, they think they know everything about you. For me, that label was enough to make them laugh, point fingers, and treat me as if I was less than everyone else. I can still hear their whispers at the grocery store, at the bus stop, even at church, where people are supposed to be kind. They would say things like, "Poor girl, she ruined her own life," or "No wonder she's alone. No one would ever stay with someone like her." They didn't know how much strength it took just to get out of bed some mornings. They didn't know the nights I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I would feed my child the next day. They didn't know the tears I swallowed so my little one would never see me break. But people didn't care about the truth. They only cared about the story they wanted to tell. Life as a single mom wasn't easy. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to make ends meet. There were days I went without eating so my child could have a full plate. There were winters where I wrapped myself in thin blankets because I'd given the warmest one to my little one. I wore secondhand clothes, carried worn-out shoes, and smiled through it all as if nothing was wrong, because I knew if I let them see me weak, they would laugh even harder. And I couldn't give them that satisfaction. But it wasn't just strangers. Sometimes it was people I thought were my friends. They would invite me to events, but I could feel the way they looked at me. Pity, judgment, disgust. It was in their eyes, even when their mouths stayed silent. And the worst part, my own family, instead of standing by me, many of them turned away. They saw me as a shame, as if my choices had stained their reputation. The silence from the people who were supposed to love me hurt far worse than the words of strangers. Still, I kept going. I told myself, one day they'll see. One day they'll understand what it really means to be strong. One day, my child will know that I gave everything just to keep us alive. But that day felt so far away. Sometimes, it felt like it would never come. Then came the wedding. A wedding that wasn't mine. Of course it was someone else's. Someone from the same community that had whispered about me for years. I almost didn't go. I told myself I didn't belong there, that no one would want me there anyway. But something inside me said, go. Just go. Hold your head high, even if they laugh again. So I dressed up the best I could. My dress wasn't new. My shoes had scuff marks. My hair wasn't done by a stylist. But I walked in with my child's hand in mind, telling myself that I had just as much right to be there as anyone else. From the moment I entered the hall, I felt the eyes. I heard the laughter behind covered mouths. The whispers weren't even subtle this time. Some women giggled, nudging each other as I walked past. A few men looked me up and down with that smirk that said, "She'll always be alone." My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. I pretended I didn't hear. I pretended I didn't care. But inside, I was breaking all over again. The music played, the lights sparkled, and everyone seemed to be living in a fairy tale. Everyone but me. I stood in the corner, clutching my child's hand, trying to disappear into the background. I wondered if coming here was a mistake. I wondered if this night would only end with more pain, more humiliation. And then, it happened. The moment that changed everything. The moment that none of them could have predicted. But that part of the story, I'll get to soon. For now, all I can tell you is this. Everything I had suffered, every laugh, every whisper, every cruel glance, was about to collide in one single night, and what the groom revealed would silence them all. The music in the wedding hall swirled around me like a storm I couldn't escape. Laughter rose and fell in waves, some genuine, some sharp enough to cut through my skin. I stood in the shadows, pretending I didn't hear, pretending I didn't notice, but deep inside, every whisper was another knife. My child tugged gently at my hand, smiling, unaware of the poison around us. I forced myself to smile back, as if nothing was wrong. I kept telling myself, just get through tonight, just make it through without breaking. The ceremony began. The groom walked in, proud and confident, with his family surrounding him like royalty. People clapped, cameras flashed, Music played louder. He looked happy, almost too happy, the way grooms usually do when their new life is about to begin. But for me, the happiness in that room only reminded me of what I had lost, what I had never been allowed to have. Still, I stayed. I stayed because I had promised myself I would not run away anymore. Not from whispers, not from shame, not from anyone. I didn't expect him to even notice me. After all, I was invisible to most people in that hall. But then, it happened. His eyes found mine. For a split second, I thought I imagined it. The groom, looking right at me, not with mockery, not with judgment, but with something else. Something heavy, something that made my heart skip. I quickly looked away, pretending to adjust my child's jacket. But when I looked back, he was still staring. And in that moment, I felt the air shift. The ceremony continued. Vows were exchanged. Traditions followed. Applause thundered. But underneath all of it, I could feel something building. A tension, a weight pressing on the room that no one else seemed to notice. It was in his eyes, in the way his smile seemed just a little too forced. And then, when it came time for the speeches, everything changed. The groom took the microphone. The room quieted. People leaned in, ready to hear sweet words about love, about destiny, about the woman he had just married. He began the way everyone expected. He thanked his parents, his friends, his bride. His voice was steady, his smile bright. But then, he paused. A silence fell over the hall. He looked around the room, slowly, carefully, and then his eyes found me again. My stomach dropped. My hands tightened around my child's. I wanted to vanish. I wanted to melt into the floor, but I couldn't move. His gaze pinned me where I stood, like a secret about to burst into flames. And then, he spoke words I will never forget. "You all see me standing here today as a groom," he said. "But before I became this man, before I wore this suit, before I had this moment, there was someone who changed my life. Someone none of you would expect." Murmurs rippled through the room. Guests leaned closer. The bride tilted her head, confused. His voice didn't tremble, it grew stronger, heavier. "She's here tonight. Many of you have mocked her. Many of you have judged her. Some of you have whispered about her when she walked into this very room. But you don't know what she has done. You don't know the sacrifice she made." My breath caught in my chest. Heat rushed to my face. My knees felt weak. I wanted to scream, "Stop, don't do this." But my voice was trapped in my throat. My child looked up at me, wide-eyed, sensing the storm gathering around us. The groom continued, his voice now sharp enough to cut through every whisper, every laugh. "When I was lost, when I had nothing, when no one else would stand by me, she did. She gave me a chance. She gave me food when I was hungry. She gave me hope when I thought I was nothing. Without her, I would not be standing here today. Without her, I wouldn't even be alive." The hall fell silent, dead silent. The clinking of glasses stopped. The shuffling of feet stopped. Every eye in the room turned not to him but to me. I felt their stares burn into my skin. The very people who laughed at me minutes earlier now looked at me with shock, confusion, disbelief. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. And then, his voice cracked with emotion. "She is the reason I am the man I am today. She carried her own battles, raised her child alone, and still found a way to save someone like me. You all laughed at her. You all judged her. But tonight, I want you to know the truth. I am proud to say, I owe my life to Alec Rose." Gasps filled the hall. The bride looked frozen, her smile gone. The groom's family exchanged frantic glances. Guests whispered louder now, but not with mockery, this time with shock. Some even covered their mouths in disbelief. My hands shook. My eyes blurred with tears I had been holding back for years. All the pain, all the judgment, all the nights of crying in silence. It was as if every single moment had led to this one. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the shame of the room. I wasn't the broken single mom everyone thought I was. I was someone who mattered, someone whose choices, sacrifices, and pain had shaped another person's destiny. But with that revelation came something else. A tension so sharp it nearly broke me. Because, as powerful as his words were, I knew this wasn't the end. No, this was only the beginning. The hall was about to explode with questions, with gossip, with accusations. And I wasn't sure I was ready. That's, as the groom lowered the microphone, his eyes still locked on mine, I knew my life was about to change forever, for better or worse. I didn't know yet, but I could feel it in my bones. This night wasn't just a wedding, it was the night the truth finally broke free. The silence that followed his words was deafening. For a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. The chandeliers above glimmered, the music had died, and the laughter that had once cut me so deeply had vanished. All that remained was the sound of my own heartbeat hammering in my ears, and the weight of hundreds of eyes fixed on me. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the ground beneath me to open up and swallow me whole. My child's small hand clutched mine tighter, confused, frightened. He didn't understand why everyone was staring, why whispers had suddenly shifted from mocking giggles to gasps of shock. He only knew that something had changed. I could feel his little body tremble against me. The groom's words hung in the air like a storm that refused to pass. I owe my life to Alec Rose. Over and over, those words echoed in my head, words I never expected to hear, words that, for a moment, felt like justice. But justice is never that simple. The bride's face was pale. She forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed her a storm of confusion and anger swirling behind them. Her family shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their perfect image of a perfect wedding crumbling in front of everyone. Guests leaned closer to each other, whispering, trying to piece together a story they didn't know, a truth they had ignored for so long. And me, I stood frozen. My legs felt weak. My palms were slick with sweat. I could barely breathe. I had lived my life in silence, carrying my struggles alone, never demanding recognition, never expecting gratitude. And now, here I was, thrust into the center of attention in the most unexpected way. I could feel the shift in the crowd. The same women who had laughed behind their hands now stared at me with wide eyes, some even with tears glistening in their lashes. Men who once smirked at me in disgust now shook their heads, as if ashamed. But there were others, too, those who still narrowed their eyes, who whispered with bitterness, who refused to let go of their judgment. For them, my worth was still defined by the label they had given me. Single mom. The groom's voice broke through the murmurs again. You all need to understand something. Strength is not measured by wealth, by status, or by the perfect image we show the world. Strength is measured by sacrifice. And Alec Rose, she showed me what true strength looks like. My knees buckled slightly. I wanted to cry, to scream, to run out of that hall and never return. But something inside me wouldn't let me move. Maybe it was the years of silence. Maybe it was the years of swallowing pain. Maybe it was my child, standing at my side, looking up at me with eyes that begged me not to break. So I stood there, silent, still, stronger than I felt. Then the questions began, not out loud at first, just whispers. Is it true? What did she do for him? Why would he say that on his wedding day? Some faces turned to me, demanding answers without words. Some glared at the groom, as if he had betrayed them by speaking the truth. The bride's mother covered her mouth, her eyes darting between me and her new son, and the bride herself. Her hands trembled as she clutched her bouquet tighter, her jaw set, her eyes burning with unspoken rage. I wanted to scream that I had done nothing extraordinary, that I had simply helped a young man when he was lost, when he had no one else, that I had given him food, shelter, and hope. Not because I expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. But my voice would not come. And perhaps, in that moment, silence spoke louder than words ever could. The tension in the hall grew heavier. Guests shifted in their seats, unable to focus on the celebration, their curiosity pulling them toward the shadows where I stood. The music never resumed. The laughter never returned. It was as if the entire wedding had been swallowed by this one revelation. And I realized something terrifying. This moment would not end here. When the night was over, when the lights dimmed and the guests went home, the whispers would follow me. The questions would multiply. The judgment would twist into new shapes. And I would once again be left to carry it all. But there was also something else, something I had not felt in years. A flicker of pride, a flicker of dignity. For the first time, the truth was not hidden. For the first time, someone had spoken my name, not as an insult, not as a joke, but as a testament to strength. The groom had risked everything, his image, his celebration, even his bride's trust, to acknowledge me. And though I did not ask for it, though I never wanted this spotlight, I couldn't deny that part of me was grateful. I looked at my child, who was still holding my hand tightly, his eyes wide with both fear and wonder. And in that moment, I knew this was no longer just my battle. Everything I had endured, every laugh, every whisper, every cruel word was not just about me. It was about him, about the world he would grow up in, about whether he would live in a place where kindness is mocked and strength is hidden, or whether he would learn that even in silence, truth finds its way. The bride finally stood. Her voice shook, but her words cut through the air like glass. "Enough," she said, her eyes blazing. "This is my wedding, my moment, and I will not let it be stolen." The groom lowered his gaze, silent now, as the weight of what he had revealed settled over him. The hall was divided, half in awe of his courage, half in shock at the chaos he had caused. And me, I stood in the middle of it all, feeling the storm closing in, tighter and tighter. I didn't know what would happen next. Would they cast me out? Would the bride's family demand answers? Would the whispers turn into accusations I couldn't fight? I didn't know, but deep inside, I could feel it. This was only the beginning, because once the truth escapes, it can never be silenced again. The bride's words cracked through the hall like thunder. "This is my wedding, my moment, and I will not let it be stolen." Every eye turned back to her. For the first time, her smile was gone completely, replaced by a mask of rage and desperation. She stood tall, clutching her bouquet so tightly the stems bent beneath her grip. The groom tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away sharply, her glare burning into him. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you humiliate me in front of everyone?" His face softened, his eyes begging for her to understand. "I didn't mean to humiliate you. I only wanted them to know the truth, what she has done." His hand lifted faintly toward me, but he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew who he meant. A ripple went through the crowd. Guests leaned forward in their chairs, some whispering, some openly staring at me, waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to explain the secret that had just shattered the perfect illusion of this wedding. I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because every word burned in my throat before it could escape. Years of silence had become my armor. If I spoke now, if I revealed everything, I would strip myself bare before people who never cared enough to listen in the first place. The bride's family began to stir. Her mother, her voice trembling with both anger and shame, stepped closer to her daughter. "We cannot allow this to continue," she said, glaring at the groom. "This is a wedding, not a courtroom. If you truly respect this union, you will stop this nonsense right now." The groom lowered his head, but his voice was steady. "It's not nonsense. Without her, I would not be here. I would not even be alive. And if I have to start my marriage by lying, then what kind of marriage would that be?" The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts. A few people even stood, their voices rising above the chaos. "What is he talking about? Alive? What does he mean? Who is she to him?" Questions flew like daggers, each one cutting deeper, until the weight of them all pressed down on me. My chest ached with the pressure, my palms were cold, and my child tugged on my sleeve, his little voice barely a whisper. "Mommy, can we go home?" Home. The word pierced me. Home was supposed to be safety, but tonight even home felt unreachable. Tonight, I was trapped in a storm I could not escape. The bride's face twisted, and she turned her fury back to me. "You," she spat, her voice trembling but sharp. "What did you do to him? What did you do to make him stand here, on our wedding day, and praise you like some saint?" Dozens of eyes followed her words to me, searing into my skin. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. For so long, I had prayed for someone to see me, to recognize my struggle, to acknowledge my worth. And now, in this moment, when the truth was finally trying to break free, I found myself choking on it. The groom stepped forward, his voice raised now, strong against the noise. "She saved me. When I had nothing, when I had no one, she gave me food when I was hungry, shelter when I was lost. She gave me the strength to stand again. That's the truth." The hall fell into stunned silence. Some faces softened with realization, others hardened with disbelief. The bride's cheeks burned crimson, her lips pressed tight as if to keep from screaming. Her perfect day was collapsing, and I was the shadow she blamed for it. I wanted to run. Every muscle in my body begged me to, but my son's small hand held me in place, anchoring me. His eyes, wide with both fear and admiration, begged me not to let go. The bride's father finally stood, his voice booming with authority. "Enough. This charade ends now. Whatever history you two share, it has no place here. My daughter will not be humiliated on her wedding day." His words were final, commanding, and cruel. A few guests clapped in agreement, as if desperate to restore the order of celebration, but others shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between me and the groom, as if realizing that silencing truth did not erase it. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced them back. I would not cry, not here, not in front of them. I had cried enough in silence. Tonight, I would not give them that satisfaction. I looked at the bride, her fury, her trembling shoulders, her pride crumbling before the crowd. And for the first time, I didn't feel small under her gaze. I didn't feel broken. I felt free, because no matter how loudly they tried to shut me out, the truth had already been spoken. And once spoken, it could never be taken back. The music did not return. The laughter never rose again. The wedding carried on in form, but the spirit of it was gone. Guests forced smiles, clinked glasses, but every whisper, every glance carried the weight of what had been revealed. And I knew, deep in my heart, this night would follow me forever. But so would the truth. The wedding ended, but not in the way anyone had planned. The bride forced a smile for the photographs, her hand clutching the groom's arm like a chain rather than a touch of love. Guests drifted away in silence, their shoes clicking on the marble floor, as though they were walking through a funeral instead of a celebration. I left quietly, my son's small hand locked in mine. The night air was sharp, cold against my skin, but it felt cleaner than the suffocating stairs I had endured inside. The street outside the grand hall stretched wide and empty, and for the first time that evening, I breathed. The groom's words echoed inside me. She saved me. She gave me shelter when I had nothing. For years, my story had been invisible. For years, my struggle had been something whispered behind closed doors, mocked by neighbors, erased by those who pretended I didn't matter. But now, the truth was out in the open, spoken aloud in a hall full of people who would never forget it. And yet, the truth had come at a cost. I knew that by tomorrow, whispers would spread across the town. My name would be on their tongues, carried in stories twisted and reshaped to fit their liking. Some would paint me as a saint, others as a curse, but none of them would ever truly understand what it had cost me to stand there in silence, letting my scars be revealed without defense. My son looked up at me as we walked, his little voice breaking the silence. "Mummy, are you okay?" I wanted to lie, to tell him yes, to say that everything was fine. But children know the truth better than anyone. They can hear it in the silence between your words, in the heaviness of your breath. So instead, I knelt down, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "We're stronger than they think," because that was the truth. Every tear I had shed, every night I had stayed awake wondering how I would feed him, every laugh I had faked to hide the cracks in my spirit, those things had not broken me. They had built me. They had forged a strength the world could not erase. Still, I could not stop asking myself, why did the truth feel like both a victory and a punishment? The bride would go on with her life, but every time she looked at her husband, she would remember the words he spoke that night. She would remember that another woman's name had been stitched into the fabric of her wedding day. And maybe, just maybe, she would come to understand that envy and hatred could never erase gratitude and truth. As for me, I realized something far heavier. The silence of my parents had hurt worse than the bride's words. All these years, they had known my struggle, seen my pain, and yet they had chosen silence. They had chosen to let me be crushed rather than to stand beside me, and that silence echoed louder than any insult, any whisper, any laugh. But it also taught me something. I could survive without their approval. I could survive without their love, because I had already been surviving with nothing. That night, lying awake, I thought about the generations before. Meet the single mothers, the women who were laughed at, the ones whose stories were buried under shame and silence. And I wondered how many voices had been lost because the world decided they weren't worth hearing. How many women like me had carried the weight of survival without anyone ever stopping to see the strength it took. I realized then that my story wasn't just mine. It was every story that had been dismissed, every sacrifice that had been mocked, every act of survival that had been erased by pride and prejudice. And I knew, as painful as it had been, that the groom's words had planted a seed that night. Maybe some would ignore it, maybe some would laugh it away, but others would let it grow. Others would remember that sometimes the people they look down on are the very people who hold the power to save lives. When I looked at my son sleeping peacefully beside me, I whispered into the darkness, "You will know the truth. You will know your mother's strength, and you will never be ashamed of where you come from. Because if the world would not tell our story with respect, then I would." I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel. Not victory, not peace, not even relief. It was something smaller, but far more powerful. Hope that one day, the laughter would fade, the whispers would die, and the silence would break not just for me, but for every voice the world had tried to bury. And so I leave you with this question. How many more stories like mine must be lived, silenced, and forgotten before the world finally learns to listen?